In the sprawling, restless city of Los Angeles, there exists a particular kind of invisibility. It is the invisibility of the woman who scrubs marble floors at dawn, whose hands smell permanently of bleach and lemon polish, whose footsteps echo through empty corridors and no one turns to listen. Sofia Vasquez moves through the Vitoli mansion like a shadow in motion. She straightens cushions that are already perfectly aligned. She polishes chandeliers that have been polished 1,000 times before. The armed guards in tailored black suits never look at her face. They look through her, past her, as if she is part of the architecture itself, a fixture, a tool, something that exists only to serve. The mansion sits high in the Hollywood Hills, all glass and steel and imported Italian marble, a monument to wealth so absolute it barely seems real. The floors are cold beneath Sofia's knees as she scrubs. The chandeliers above cast fractured light across everything. She has worked in the Vitoli household for 3 years, and in that time she has learned to become smaller, quieter, less. Her black and white maid's uniform is worn at the edges. Her dark hair is always pulled back so tightly it leaves marks on her temples. She is 31 years old, but exhaustion has carved a decade into her face. What the guards do not know, what no one in this mansion knows, is that Sofia carries the weight of the entire world in her apron pocket. Not physically. Physically, there is only one item there, a photograph, worn soft at the corners, showing a man with kind eyes and a smile. Her husband. Miguel. Dead now for 5 years. A heart attack in a parking lot at 2:53 in the afternoon. Just like that. No warning. No goodbye. Unfolded beneath that photograph, a stack of papers that means everything. Medical bills. Surgical invoices. Statements from the hospital demanding payment. $85,000 in 12 days, or her son will not receive the experimental surgery he needs. The surgery that might let him hear again. The surgery that might give him back his voice. Micah is 7 years old. He has been deaf since birth. His silence is not peaceful, it is total, it is absolute, and it is something she has been saving for since the day he was born. She counts money the way other people count heartbeats. Necessary. Constant. Desperate. $78. That is what remains in her wallet. $78 to last until payday, which is 6 days away. The rent on her studio apartment 30 miles from the mansion is due in 4 days. The apartment is not large. It is barely large enough for her and Micah to both sleep on the same narrow bed. The windows do not close completely. Rain comes in during storms, and she has learned to position buckets strategically. But it is home. It is theirs. This particular November evening tastes like cold air and the electric burn of coming rain. Sofia mops the marble entrance hall of the mansion, her movements practiced and efficient. The mop handle is damp and heavy in her hands. The smell of the cleaning solution rises in sharp waves. She does not think about money anymore because thinking about money makes her hands shake, and shaking hands make mistakes, and mistakes mean being fired, and being fired means game over. So she thinks about nothing. She moves. She cleans. She exists in the space between one moment and the next. At 6:43 in the evening, the front doors of the mansion open with a sound like thunder. Wind rushes in, carrying November rain in sharp, horizontal sheets. Sofia looks up, just a flicker of her eyes, but enough to see. A man stands in the doorway, rain streaming from his black cashmere coat. He is tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who seems to occupy more space than his body should reasonably take. His hair is dark, silvered at the temples, swept back from a face that has been carved from stone and consequence. His eyes are the color of winter itself, cold, intelligent, ancient in their coldness. A scar runs from the outside corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, a thin white line that somehow makes him look more dangerous, not less. This is Lucian Vitoli, the owner of this mansion. The owner of everything. Sofia's hand still. Habit. The household staff has been trained to become absolutely motionless when Lucian Vitoli enters a room. But Lucian is not looking at Sofia. Not yet. He is looking past her, down the hallway toward the sitting room, where voices have suddenly begun to rise. One of them belongs to a woman. The other to a man. The woman's voice is sharp, crystalline, cruel. The man's voice is rough, aggressive, full of something like victory. Lucian moves. His men follow him, Rocco and Gino, both built like concrete walls in expensive suits, both moving with the synchronized precision of men who have hurt people together for a very long time. Sophia should go. She should retreat into the background, should disappear, should become invisible again. This is the rule. This is always the rule. But she is frozen. The shouting in the sitting room escalates. A woman cries out, not in anger, but in pain. The sound cuts through the marble mansion like a knife through stillness. Sophia recognizes that sound. She knows that sound. It is the sound of someone being hurt. She abandons the mop. It clatters against the floor, the handle falling with a sound that echoes off the marble. She moves toward the sitting room without thinking, which is a mistake, which is always a mistake, and she knows it even as she is doing it. What she finds there will change everything. Harold Brennan stands in the center of the room, one hand twisted into the hair of a woman Sophia recognizes. Victoria Ashford. The woman who hired her 3 years ago, the woman whose family owns half of Los Angeles, the woman whose cruelty is as refined as her jewelry. But Victoria is not the focus of Harold's rage right now. She is hanging from his grip like a rag doll, but he is looking past her, at something, at someone. At a child. Micah stands in the corner of the room, his small body trembling. He is 7 years old and he has been deaf his entire life, which means he cannot hear what is happening, which means his confusion is transforming into pure terror. His mouth opens and closes without sound. His hands make signs in the air, the signs Sophia taught him, the signs that mean help me, that mean please, that mean I am scared and I do not understand. Harold sees Sophia in the doorway and something in his face changes. The expression shifts into something darker, something hungry, something that knows exactly what it is looking at. Ah, he says, and his voice is the sound of glass breaking. The invisible maid. Come to witness. How convenient. Sophia's breath stops. Every nerve in her body is screaming at her to move, to run, to take Micah and flee. But she is rooted to the ground. It is as if her feet have become part of the marble itself. Stay, Lucian says. His voice is quiet. It is not loud, and yet it fills every space in the room. His voice sounds like an oath carved into stone. It sounds like thunder wrapped in velvet. It sounds like a man who has never been told no in his entire life. Harold turns toward him, finally, and the grip on Victoria's hair loosens just slightly. Get out, Harold says, but there is something uncertain in his voice now. Something that recognizes that the game has changed, that the shape of the room has shifted, that something immensely dangerous has just walked through the door. Lucian moves forward. Each step is deliberate. Each step is controlled. He is wearing a suit that probably costs more than Sophia's car, more than her apartment, more than everything she owns in the world combined. His watch catches the light, gold, impossibly expensive, the kind of watch worn by men who measure time in power instead of minutes. Release her, Lucian says, and it is not a request. Harold's hand tightens instead. Victoria makes a sound like a wounded animal. And that is when Lucian moves. It happens so fast that Sophia's mind cannot quite process the sequence. One moment Harold is holding Victoria. The next moment Harold is on his knees, his arm twisted behind his back, his face pressed against the marble floor. Rocco and Gino materialize on either side of him like they have always been there, like they are part of the air itself. Harold's mouth opens. He tries to shout something. The sound that comes out is not words. It is just noise. Lucian's hand is at the back of Harold's neck, and his expression has not changed at all. He looks as composed as he was when he walked through the door. This is somehow more terrifying than if he had become angry, had become violent, had allowed his rage to show. Sofia Vasquez, Lucian says, and her name in his mouth sounds like a spell being cast, like a prophecy, like a door opening in a wall she did not know existed. Take your son and leave this house. Do not return. Sophia cannot move. She is staring at this man, at this moment, at the fact that he knows her name. That he has looked at her before. That he has seen her. Now, Lucian says, and it is not cruel, but it is absolute. Sophia moves. She reaches out and takes Micah's small hand in hers. His fingers are cold. He is shaking. She signs quickly, moving her hands in the shapes that mean it is okay, that mean come with me, that mean we are safe, even though she does not know if that is true. As she pulls Micah past Harold Brennan, she hears him struggling, hears him trying to speak, hears the terrible sound of Rocco and Gino adjusting their grip on him. The November rain is waiting outside. It soaks through Sophia's thin coat immediately. The wind tears through her clothes like blades. She and Micah run down the mansion's long driveway, away from the light, away from the marble floors, away from the invisible life she has been living. Behind them, inside the mansion, she hears a sound that will stay with her forever. It is not a scream. It is worse than a scream. It is the sound of a man understanding, in that moment, that he has made a terrible mistake. That he has provoked the wrong person. That his life, as he has known it, is over. Sophia does not look back. 3 weeks before the mansion became a fortress of silence, Sophia Vasquez stood in a hallway that smelled like lemon polish and old money, clutching a folded piece of paper that might save her son's life or destroy what was left of her dignity. The hallway stretched forever. White walls. Recessed lighting. Paintings that cost more than everything she had ever owned arranged in perfect rows like soldiers. Somewhere upstairs, the man called Lucian Vitoli was sleeping in a bed the size of her entire apartment. She was here to make herself invisible. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, was a woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair pulled so tight it looked like it hurt, wearing a black uniform that was pristine in a way that made Sophia acutely aware of the coffee stain on her own sweater, the one she had tried to scrub out in the apartment's broken sink. Mrs. Chen did not smile. She did not offer Sophia water or a place to sit. She simply began walking, and Sophia followed, and as they walked through the mansion's lower levels, past pantries and laundry rooms and a kitchen that looked like a hotel, Mrs. Chen explained the terms of invisibility. You'll work the night shift, Miss Vasquez. Midnight to 8 a.m. Mr. Vitoli doesn't like seeing staff during his waking hours. You understand? You're invisible. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not look at him. You do not acknowledge his presence. If he walks into a room, you leave it. If you see him in a hallway, you find another hallway. There are always other hallways in this house. Do you understand? Sophia nodded. Her hands were shaking. In her pocket, folded against her ribs, was the contract. Monthly salary, $2,200. Paid on the 15th of each month. She did the math for the 1,000th time in her head. Today was the 3rd of November. 12 days until the 15th. 12 days until she received the first payment. 12 days she did not have because the hospital had stopped giving her extensions. $85,000. That was the number that had become a prayer, a curse, a ghost that lived in her chest. Micah's heart surgery. The operation that would make him strong. The operation that would let him run without wheezing. The operation that would let him be 7 years old instead of being 7 years old and broken. Mrs. Chen was still talking. Sophia forced herself to focus. You'll clean the second-floor bathrooms, the master suite, the library, and the east wing. You'll stock the bar. You'll fold whatever clothing is in the hampers. You'll keep the kitchen prepared for any guests who might arrive. You'll never disturb the study. The study is closed. Do not go to the study. Is that clear? Clear, Sophia whispered. They stopped in front of a desk in what looked like an office. Papers were arranged there. A contract. Sophia's vision blurred. The number 78 appeared at the edge of her mind. That was what she had. $78 in her purse. $78 until the 15th. $8 a day for food. For Micah? For the inhaler he needed when his small lungs forgot how to work. You'll sign here, here, and here, Mrs. Chen said, pointing with a finger that had never been soft in its life. You acknowledge that you will not steal from Mr. Vitoli's property. You acknowledge that you will not discuss what you see or hear in this house with anyone outside this house. You acknowledge that you will keep yourself available for work at all times. You acknowledge that you understand the consequences of violating these terms. Sophia did not ask what the consequences were. She did not want to know. She signed her name 3 times. Her signature looked like it was written by a child. That night, Sophia returned to the studio apartment she shared with her son, the place that smelled like wet concrete and the neighbors cooking and the particular despair of a space that was 350 square feet and cost $3,400 a month because Harold Brennan, the landlord, had decided it was worth more. She opened the door quietly. Micah was sleeping on the fold-out couch that served as his bed, his small chest rising and falling. On his nightstand, a drawing. A heart. Purple and blue crayons. He had drawn his heart, the broken thing inside him that the doctors said needed fixing. Sophia sat on the edge of his mattress and held the photograph of her dead husband against her chest. Daniel. 2 years gone. 2 years since the accident that had left her alone with a sick child and $67 in the bank. 2 years of night shifts at the diner. 2 years of tips that never came because men like Harold Brennan believed women like her should be grateful for the chance to serve. 2 years of watching Micah's lips turn blue during the winter months. Mama. Micah's voice was small and confused with sleep. I'm here, baby. Go back to sleep. When will my heart be strong? He asked this every night now. Every single night, the same question, delivered in a voice so innocent it broke her in places she did not know could break anymore. Soon, baby. Soon. She kissed his forehead. His skin was warm. His heartbeat was irregular against her hand. She could feel it skipping, stumbling, the way his father's hand had done in the hospital 3 days before they stopped trying to save him. Sophia did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus 2 years ago, and she had never found them again. She changed into her work clothes in the dark, black pants, white blouse, black shoes with soles so thin she could feel the cold of the apartment's floor through them. She set her alarm for 11. She lay on the chair that was not quite a bed and did not sleep. At 11:30, she left a note for Micah, left her phone number written in large numbers on the refrigerator in case the downstairs neighbor needed to reach her, and walked into the November night. The Vitoli mansion looked like it was holding its breath. Black gates. A driveway that curved through manicured lawns. Guards in dark suits standing in the rain like statues. Sophia gave them her name. They checked a list. They let her through. The interior of the mansion was different at midnight. The temperature dropped. The silence became a presence, a living thing. Mrs. Chen had left instructions. Sophia's supplies were in a closet on the 2nd floor. Microfiber cloths. Industrial-strength cleaners that smelled like chemicals and broken promises. A cart that rolled on squeaking wheels. She started in the bathroom off the master suite. The sink was marble. The fixtures were gold. Everything was pristine. But in the corner, there was a stain. Dark. Rust-colored. Blood. Sophia's hand shook as she dampened a cloth. She did not ask questions. The mansion had made it clear that questions were not part of the contract. The hours passed. 1. 2. 3. The mansion revealed itself in pieces. Expensive rugs. A library with 10,000 books and not a single one with a broken spine. A bar stocked with bottles that cost more than her month's rent. She moved through it like a ghost, like she was not there, like she had already become invisible. At 5 in the morning, she was dusting the hallway outside the study when she heard him. Footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. Coming down the staircase. Sophia froze. She did not breathe. The instructions were clear. You do not acknowledge his presence. You find another hallway. She moved toward the nearest door, but he was already there, already turning the corner, already looking at her with eyes that seemed to understand that she was not invisible at all, that she was perfectly visible, that he could see her in a way that made her want to become very small. Lucian Vitoli was tall. 6'3". Broad through the shoulders. His hair was dark, almost black, and it was wet from a shower. He wore a white shirt unbuttoned at the throat, and she could see the scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw like a blade had passed through him, and he had survived it by pure will. His eyes were the color of smoke before a storm. He looked at her for 3 seconds. 4. 5. What is your name? His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Sophia could not speak. Her mouth was a desert. Sophia, she managed. Sophia. He said her name like he was testing it, like he was deciding whether it fit. You can go. It's early. Return at midnight. She left. She ran down the hallway, down the stairs, out into the rain that was beginning to fall on Los Angeles. She did not look back. She could not look back. By the time she reached the studio apartment, Micah was waking up. He was coughing. A wet sound. The sound of a heart that was not beating the way it should. She held him and rubbed his back and whispered that he was strong, that he would be strong, that the surgery was coming. 12 days until the payment. 12 days until $85,000. 12 days. Then Harold Brennan arrived. He came at sunset, when the light was turning everything the color of old bruises. He did not knock. He used his master key and pushed through the door, and Sophia was standing at the stove, reheating leftovers she had saved from the diner, and Micah was sitting at the small table coloring with crayons that were worn down to nubs. Harold was 53 years old. His belly spilled over his belt. He had the smile of a man who believed the world had promised him things and the world was obligated to deliver. He closed the door behind him and leaned against the frame in a way that made it clear he was blocking the exit. Sophia, he said, and his voice was smooth and oily. We need to talk about the rent. Sophia turned off the stove. Micah looked up from his drawing. He was drawing another heart. Always hearts. Always the broken thing inside him. The lease says $2,800 a month, Sophia said quietly. The lease says whatever I say it says, Harold replied. He took a step into the apartment. The space became smaller. Things have changed. Inflation. Maintenance. You understand? The rent is now $3,400. Due on the 1st. Sophia's hands were shaking. $3,400 meant $600 more. $600 more meant Micah's inhaler ran out 2 weeks early. $600 more meant she skipped meals she was already skipping. I can't pay that, she whispered. Harold smiled. He walked closer. His eyes moved over her body like something crawling. Unless we come to an arrangement, Sophia. Unless you find a way to make yourself useful to me. The way you used to be useful to your husband. I knew Daniel, you know. We had business together. He was always very satisfied with you. So I imagine I could be too. Micah started coughing. A terrible sound. The sound of a child whose body was failing him. Sophia grabbed her son. She pulled him against her and turned away from Harold. Get out, she said. You've got 3 days, Sophia. 3 days until the new rent is due. 3 days until you're on the street. Then we can renegotiate the arrangement. Then maybe you'll be more cooperative. He left the way he had come, using the master key, moving through her life like he owned it. Because he did. He owned the apartment. He owned the ground beneath it. He owned the air she was trying to breathe. Sophia locked the door. She held Micah as he coughed. She counted the money in her purse again. $78. She counted it 3 times to make sure she had not imagined numbers into existence. $78. 3 days until the new rent was due. But the 15th was only 9 days away now. 9 days until the first payment from the Vitoli mansion. 9 days until $2,200 appeared in her bank account. 9 days until she could breathe. She just had to survive 3 days with $78 and a landlord who believed she owed him her body. She just had to survive that small and terrible thing. Outside, November rain was beginning to fall on Los Angeles. It hammered against the windows like something trying to break in. The library door cracked open and Sophia froze, her mop handle going still in her trembling hands. It was 2:16 in the morning. The mansion was supposed to be silent at this hour, but Lucian Vitoli's voice cut through the darkness like a blade wrapped in ice. "Rocco, Gino, the shipment from the East Dock gets redistributed. I want it clean. No traces. No questions." Sophia should have walked away. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat down the hallway, to pretend she had heard nothing, seen nothing. But something pulled her forward. The gap in the door widened just enough. 3 men in dark suits surrounded a mahogany table covered in cash and photographs. Security monitors glowed behind them, showing armed trucks moving through the rain-soaked streets of Los Angeles. A gasp escaped before she could stop it. Silence swallowed the room. "Who's there?" Lucian's voice turned lethal. Heavy footsteps approached. Sophia ran. Her shoe caught on the marble floor. She crashed into a side table and the sound exploded through the mansion, a porcelain vase shattering like a gunshot in the silence. She scrambled to her feet, but Rocco and Gino were already moving, their bodies cutting off the hallway, their hands reaching for her. There was nowhere to go. They dragged her into the library. Her arms thrashed uselessly. Gino's grip was iron. The door closed behind them and Sophia understood that whatever happened next, no one would hear her scream. Lucian Vitoli rose from behind the desk. 6'3". Black suit tailored so perfectly it seemed to cost more than everything she owned. A silver watch caught the lamplight on his left wrist. His hair was dark, swept back from a face carved from granite. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, grey like a storm, penetrating, ancient with the kind of pain that swallows everything else. A scar ran from the outer corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, thin and precise like a knife had once tried to erase him. "What did you see?" His voice dropped low, deeper than should have been possible, like thunder contained in a human throat. Sophia's legs trembled so badly she thought they might give out. "Nothing, Mr. Vitoli. I saw nothing. I'm just the maid, I was just..." Rocco pulled a gun. The metal gleamed. Sophia's mind splintered into 1,000 fracturing thoughts. This was how it ended. This was how people disappeared in Los Angeles. She thought of Micah asleep in their apartment. She thought of $78 in her purse and rent due in 3 days. Lucian raised one hand. Rocco lowered the gun immediately, without question. "You're hurt," Sophia said. The words hung in the air like a confession. Lucian blinked, his gaze refocusing on her face. Blood was seeping through the white shirt covering his right forearm, dripping slowly onto the Persian rug beneath his feet. His own blood. His own wound. He'd been bleeding the entire time he was interrogating her and she hadn't noticed because fear had narrowed her world to nothing but survival. Nursing instinct overrode everything else. 3 years of caring for her son when he was sick. 3 years of knowing that wounds needed cleaning or they became infections. 3 years of being responsible for a life that depended entirely on her steadiness. That needs cleaning before it gets infected. "Please, sit." The room held its breath. Rocco's hand moved toward his gun again. Gino's jaw clenched. But Lucian moved to the leather chair and lowered himself into it, his eyes never leaving her face, and Sophia understood that she had just done something no one expected. No one challenged him. No one gave him orders. No one told the man who could erase them with a word to do anything at all. She moved to his side with steady hands, unrolling the sleeve of his shirt. The gash was deep and clean, made by something sharp. Not a struggle. Something deliberate. His blood was warm against her fingers. She used the antiseptic spray from her cleaning cart, the clean cloth tucked into her pocket. As she worked, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, to smell the expensive cologne mixed with rain and something darker she couldn't name, Lucian watched her. "What's your name?" His voice was quieter now, less like a weapon. "Sofia Vasquez." "You're not afraid?" "I'm terrified," she said, taping the bandage in place with fingers that only shook a little now. "But you're bleeding." When she finished, she met his eyes. Grey like winter. Grey like the sky before a storm. Grey like something that had learned to see the worst in people and expect nothing better. "I have a son," she said. "I need this job." "Whatever I saw, I didn't see it." Lucian nodded slowly. His arm, wrapped and clean now, rested on the chair's armrest. "Go home, Sofia Vasquez." She left before he could change his mind, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might crack her ribs. The elevator ride down felt like descending into the earth. The lobby stretched like a tunnel. By the time she reached the street, rain was hammering against the pavement like something trying to break through. What Sofia did not know was that before she reached the elevator, before her hand even touched the brass button, Lucian had already whispered a single name to Rocco. By the time she unlocked her apartment door, 2 men in dark sedans were running her background. By the time she checked on Micah sleeping in his narrow bed, mouth open, one hand clutching the photograph of his father, Lucian Vitoli knew everything about her. He knew about her husband Daniel, dead 3 years from a heart attack that shouldn't have killed a man so young. He knew about the medical bill stacked on her kitchen counter like a debt that could never be paid. He knew that in 9 days, Micah's heart surgery was scheduled at Los Angeles Children's Hospital. He knew the cost, $85,000. He knew that Sofia had exactly $78 in her purse and no way to close that gap. And for the first time in 15 years, Rocco and Gino saw something shift in his expression. Something that looked almost like purpose. 2 days later, Sofia brought Micah to work because there was no one else to watch him. No babysitter. No mother nearby. No family at all except the 2 of them, moving through Los Angeles like ghosts that no one was supposed to see. She hid him in the servant's kitchen with coloring books and strict instructions, "Be silent as a mouse, baby." It's a game. A very important game. But Micah wondered. He was 7 years old and brave in the way that only children with missing fathers could be brave, moving through the world without the weight of understanding what he should fear. He found Lucian in the study at dawn, reviewing papers in the grey light before the city woke. "Are you a prince?" Micah's voice was small but clear. "You have a castle." Lucian looked up from his desk. The child was wearing a Batman shirt with a hole near the collar. His hair was uncombed. His eyes were bright as new coins. "I'm not a prince," Lucian said. "Then why do you look so sad?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Lucian had no answer. Micah climbed into the leather chair beside him without asking permission, his small body making the expensive furniture seem suddenly ridiculous. "My mama says when you're sad, you should draw. Want to see my picture?" He showed a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's me, that's mama, and that's my papa in heaven." Lucian's jaw tightened. His hands, scarred and powerful, went still on the desk. Before he could respond, Sofia burst into the study, panicked, breathless. "Micah! I'm so sorry, Mr. Vitoli, he didn't mean to." "He's fine." Lucian's voice was steady. "What's his name?" "Micah." "How old?" 7. Lucian looked at the drawing again. Something in his face shifted, like a door opening to a room he'd kept locked for years. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "That's a very good drawing, Micah." Later that day, Lucian called Sophia to his office. She came trembling, certain she was about to be fired, certain that her moment of weakness 2 nights ago, stopping to bandage his arm, had cost her the only job keeping her and Micah alive. Instead, he slid an envelope across the desk. She opened it. The check was made out to Los Angeles Children's Hospital. $85,000. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Your son needs surgery," Lucian said. His eyes were on the window, watching the rain begin to fall again outside. "In 12 days. The hospital sent you a final notice." She stared at the check, her hands shaking. "I can't accept this. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to." Rocco and Gino watched from the doorway, their jaws slack. Rocco leaned close to Gino and whispered something inaudible. Both men exchanged a look neither had seen in 15 years of serving Lucian Vitoli. But what Sophia didn't know was that Lucian's brother had a son once too. 7 years old. With eyes just like Micah's eyes. Dead now for a decade, along with his mother, along with everyone Lucian had ever loved. Dead because Lucian had been too late. Everything changed when Victoria Ashford arrived. She came the next evening to a charity gala at the mansion, dripping diamonds, her smile sharp as broken glass. She was 43 years old, wealthy in the way that old families are wealthy, business associate and childhood friend wrapped into one poisonous package. She appeared on Lucian's arm as the evening began, and the moment she saw Sophia in her maid uniform serving champagne, something predatory flickered across her face. "Lucian, darling," Victoria said, loud enough for others nearby to hear, "your help is looking rather worn. Is that a bruise on her cheek?" Sophia's hand touched her face instinctively. The mark from Harold Brennan was still there, purple fading to yellow. The handprint he'd left when she'd refused him. Victoria smiled, poison sweet. "You really should vet your staff better. Who knows what kind of filth you're letting into your home? I've always heard maids supplement their meager wages through other arrangements. Tell me, Sophia, how much are you stealing to afford your little boy's medical crisis?" Everyone knows the real story. The champagne glasses rattled on Sophia's tray. Her hand shook so badly she thought they might shatter on the marble floor. Lucian stepped between them, his voice turning lethal. "Careful, Victoria." But Victoria continued, speaking directly to Sophia now, her voice dripping cruelty like venom. "What respectable man would want you after you've sold yourself? Your husband certainly knew." "Enough," Lucian said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Victoria laughed and walked away, her diamonds catching the light, leaving Sophia humiliated in front of a room full of Los Angeles' most powerful families. That night, Harold Brennan appeared at the mansion's service entrance. He was drunk. His shirt was unbuttoned. His eyes held the look of a man who believed the world owed him everything. "Where's my rent, Sophia?" He grabbed her wrist, pulled her close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You've been avoiding me." "It's the 15th. That's $4,200. I paid you last week," she started. "Last month's. This month I need the new amount. Unless—" His hand closed around her wrist tighter, his thumb pressing into her pulse. "You and I come to an understanding. One night. That's all I'm asking. I own that building. I own you." She jerked away. "Never." He slapped her open-handed. Her head snapped sideways and she crashed into the wall, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Then his hand closed around her throat and she couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but claw at his fingers as he pressed her against the cold stone. "You don't get to say no to me," he hissed. Then, footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. Lucian appeared in the hallway with Rocco and Gino flanking him like shadows made solid. He moved fast, faster than such a large man should have been able to move, and slammed Harold against the wall with his forearm pressed across the landlord's throat. "Take your hand off her." Lucian's voice was quiet. Deadly. Absolutely final. Harold released Sophia, stumbling backward, choking. "This is between me and my tenant. She's under my protection now," Lucian said. "Explain to me why I shouldn't break every bone in your hand." Harold's face went purple. "She owes me money. I'm just collecting what's mine." Lucian looked at Sophia, taking in the handprint already darkening on her throat, the tears streaming down her face, the way she was struggling just to breathe. Something ancient and merciless flickered across his face. He released Harold. "Get out of this city. If I see you near her again, they won't find your body." Harold ran, gasping, terrified, understanding finally that he had crossed a line from which there was no return. But what Sophia didn't know was that both Harold Brennan and Victoria Ashford had just signed their death warrants in blood. Late that night, Sophia found Micah asleep on the library couch. She sat beside him, watching over him, unable to leave him alone anymore. The mansion felt safer than home. Everything felt safer now. Lucian appeared in the doorway. He sat in the chair across from her without asking. "He's a good kid," Lucian said. "He's everything," Sophia whispered. "The surgery, it's scheduled next week. Because of you." Silence settled between them like snow. Then Micah, sleep-talking, "Love you, Mama, love you, Papa." His small hand reached out and grabbed Lucian's larger one without waking. Lucian froze, staring at the small fingers wrapped around his own. Sophia whispered, "He's been without a father for 3 years." Lucian didn't pull away. His scarred hand remained in the child's grip, and something shifted in his chest. Something that had been locked away since the day his brother died. Something that felt almost like hope. Outside, the November rain continued to fall on Los Angeles, steady and relentless, washing the streets clean of everything except the truth that in this city of angels and demons, love had just arrived to settle accounts. 6 days after Harold Brennan's hands left their marks on Sophia's skin, the rain in Los Angeles fell harder than anyone could remember. It came down in sheets, cold and relentless, turning the streets into rivers of neon and grief. In Lucian Vitoli's office on the 42nd floor, rain hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a city that belonged to him in ways most people would never understand. Rocco Messina stood across from his boss with a manila folder in his hands, his face carved from stone. 23 years working for Lucian, and Rocco had learned that the worst moments always began with silence. The kind of silence that meant someone was about to disappear. "We found the connection," Rocco said, placing photographs across the mahogany desk one by one. Each image was a knife wound delivered slowly. "Victoria Ashford. She's been feeding information to the Rossetti family for 2 years, minimum. Phone transcripts, meeting details, security protocols." Lucian didn't move. His hands remained flat on the desk, fingers spread, and Rocco saw the scar running from his left knuckle to his wrist tense and release. The scar from the night his brother died. "She was involved in the betrayal," Rocco continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "The one that got your brother killed. That got his son killed. The boy would have been Micah's age now. 7 years old. Gone for 7 years." The silence in the room became a living thing, pressing down on both men like a coffin lid being sealed. Lucian's eyes moved across the photographs without blinking. Victoria at a restaurant with known Rossetti associates. Victoria on a phone call, her mouth caught mid-sentence, diamonds glittering at her throat. Victoria at his own family dinner, smiling, while she fed information that cost lives. "Where is she?" His voice came out like a blade wrapped in ice. "Her penthouse. She doesn't know we know." Rocco watched his boss stand. Every movement was controlled, deliberate, the way a general surveys a battlefield. "Bring her in by midnight," Lucian said. Then he was gone, moving toward the elevator, toward the rain, toward justice that would not come quietly. At that same hour, 3 blocks away in the mansion's guest quarters, Sophia was tucking Micah into bed. He wore Batman pajamas that Lucian had bought him, refused to take off the cape even while sleeping. His small hand gripped the stuffed animal he'd named Detective Mittens, and he was already halfway to dreams. Sophia smoothed his hair, pressed a kiss to his forehead, whispered the same prayer she'd whispered for 3 years, "Keep him safe. Please keep him safe." She turned off the lamp. The hallway stretched long and quiet, lined with artwork worth more than her entire life. She was walking toward the master bedroom when the service entrance door exploded inward. Rain poured through the open frame like a curse. Harold Brennan stood there, soaking wet, his eyes wild and drunk and desperate. His hands were shaking. His shirt was torn. He looked like a man who had nothing left to lose because he was right. "Sophia!" His voice cracked with rage. She didn't scream. 3 years of living in terror had taught her that screaming only made things worse. She moved backward, hands raised, speaking in the calm voice she'd perfected on terrified nights. "Harold, you need to leave. Micah is asleep. Please just—" He crossed the distance in 3 strides and grabbed her by the hair. His fist twisted in the dark strands, yanking her head back, and suddenly the hallway was spinning and she was falling toward marble. Her palm scraped raw against stone. Blood came from somewhere. Pain came from everywhere. "You think you can hide behind him?" Harold was screaming now, and his voice brought Micah's cry from the bedroom, "Mama! Mama!" Harold ignored the child screaming. He grabbed Sophia by the throat, lifted her to her feet, dragged her toward the entrance hall where neon city light poured through the glass doors. Her feet barely touched the ground. She couldn't breathe. Black spots crowded her vision like ravens. Micah was pulling at Harold's legs, small fists pounding uselessly against denim, his voice breaking. "Let her go. Let her go. You're hurting her." Harold shoved the child away without looking, an almost casual movement, and Micah crashed into the wall hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Sophia felt something break inside her that had nothing to do with her ribs. Harold raised his hand to strike her again, his palm already curling into a fist, and time slowed. The rain outside sounded like static. The city lights blurred. Everything condensed into a moment of absolute helplessness. Then the entrance doors opened. Lucian Vitoli stood silhouetted against the rain, his black cashmere coat dripping water onto Italian marble, a briefcase in his left hand. His eyes were colder than death. Colder than anything that had ever lived. He didn't shout. He didn't move quickly. He simply looked at Harold Brennan holding Sofia Vasquez by the throat, and something shifted in the air like the sky before a storm. "Rocco! Gino! Take him," Lucian said quietly. 12 men in black suits emerged from the shadows of the mansion as if they had always been there. They moved without sound, ghosts in Armani, surrounding Harold like water circling a drowning man. Harold released Sophia instantly, his hands dropping, his face going grey. "This is a misunderstanding. She's my tenant. She owes me money. I have rights." His voice cracked on the last word. Lucian walked past him as if he didn't exist. He moved to Sophia, still crumpled on the marble, and helped her stand with a gentleness that made his men exchange glances. In 15 years, they had never seen him touch anyone like this. He raised her chin gently, examined the handprint darkening around her throat, the blood at the corner of her mouth, the eye already swelling shut. "Did he do this?" His voice was barely audible. She nodded, unable to speak. Lucian's hand remained under her chin for a moment longer, and then he turned to Harold Brennan. His voice dropped to something ancient and merciless. "You put your hands on her. You terrified her child. You believed she was alone in this world and that made her prey." Harold was trembling like a cornered animal. "Please. I didn't know she was yours. I swear, I'll leave the city, you'll never see me again." "Lucian, you're right. You won't." He nodded once. Harold was lifted bodily by 6 men and carried into the rain, his screams swallowed by the downpour. Sophia stood in the entrance hall, shaking, while Lucian helped her to the couch. He brought ice wrapped in cloth. He brought water. He said nothing while Micah climbed into her lap, his small body shaking, whispering, "I couldn't stop him, Mama. I tried so hard. She held him against her chest and wept. Hours later, after Micah finally slept between them, Sophia stood at the mansion window in a borrowed robe. November rain continued to fall, steady and relentless. She held the photograph of her late husband in trembling hands. The frame was worn from constant touching. His face looked at her with the same love he'd shown her on their wedding day, before the cancer, before the suffering, before he'd left her alone with a mortgage and debts that could never be paid. She whispered to the photograph, thinking she was alone, "I'm so tired. I can't protect him anymore. I can't protect myself. Maybe he'd be better off without me. Maybe everyone would be." Her hand moved to the window latch. The rain continued. The city lights blurred through her tears. Then a small voice from the doorway, "Mama." Micah stood there in his Batman cape, holding his crayon drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands. His eyes were wet with sleep and fear. "I had a bad dream. Can we sleep together?" She broke. Her knees gave way and she dropped to the carpet, pulled him close, sobbed into his hair while holding both him and the photograph of his father against her heart. "Yes, baby. Yes. Always. Always." The drawing fell from her trembling hands and scattered to the floor. In the hallway, Lucian stood in shadow, having heard every word. He said nothing. He simply watched the woman and child who had already become everything, and his eyes glistened with tears that hadn't fallen in 20 years. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Lucian hosted a meeting in his mansion's conference room. 23 crime bosses from across Los Angeles sat around a table of polished black stone. Victoria Ashford sat among them, diamonds glittering at her throat, confident in her place in this world. She had no idea that her world was about to collapse. Lucian stood and pressed play on a recording device. Victoria's voice filled the room, bright and cruel. She was laughing about how easy it was to manipulate Lucian, how his brother had deserved his fate for trusting her, how the money from the Rosettis, $200,000, she named the amount twice, was the easiest money she'd ever made. The room went silent. Victoria went white. "That's fabricated." She stood, diamonds flashing. "Lucian, you know what this is. Tell them it's fabricated." Lucian's voice was steady. "I verified every source. Every phone call. Every wire transfer. You killed my brother. You killed his son. You sold our family for $200,000. He repeated the amount a third time so every man in the room would remember it. Every boss stood. Faces hardened to stone. Victoria began screaming, began clawing at anyone who approached her, but she was already being dragged away by men who didn't belong to Lucian. These men worked for families who viewed her betrayal as an insult written in blood. She disappeared into a black van in the rain, and the kind of silence that followed acknowledged no return. That same night, at 2:53 in the morning, Harold Brennan was pulled from his apartment by men in black suits. He was dragged across rain-slick pavement to a warehouse where both Lucian and members of a rival family waited in shadow. Harold's screaming echoed off concrete walls. He begged. He bargained. He offered money and promises and anything he thought might save him. But Lucian simply handed him over to men who viewed violence against women and children as the ultimate transgression. Harold was dragged away into the November rain, his scream swallowed by thunder, and disappeared into a silence from which there would be no return. Justice had been delivered. Not quick. Not easy. Not merciful. But absolute. 3 days after Victoria Ashford vanished into the November rain, after Harold Brennan's scream stopped echoing off warehouse concrete, Micah Vasquez opened his eyes in a hospital recovery room and asked for water. Sophia sat in the chair beside his bed, her hand never leaving his small wrist. 48 hours without sleeping. 48 hours of watching the monitors, counting his heartbeats, praying to a God she hadn't believed in since her first husband died. The surgery had taken 8 hours and 20 minutes. The surgeon said his heart was now strong. Strong as a boy's heart should be, the doctor had told her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Sophia had collapsed against that hand like it was the only solid thing left in the world. She was still wearing the borrowed scrubs when Lucian appeared in the doorway. He held a bouquet of white roses, expensive ones, the kind that cost more than she used to make in a week. His black suit was impeccable. His face was carefully neutral. He looked like a man walking into a room where he was not certain of his welcome. "He's awake," Sophia whispered. "I can see." Lucian moved slowly, deliberately, as if any sudden motion might shatter something fragile in the room. He set the flowers on the windowsill, careful not to make noise. His eyes never left the boy. "How is he feeling?" "The pain is manageable. They're giving him medication." Sophia's voice was shattered glass, barely holding its shape. "The doctor says if he heals well, he'll be able to run. Play. Live like a normal child." Micah stirred. His small eyes fluttered open, and they landed first on his mother's face, then drifted to the figure in black standing at the foot of the bed. The boy had lived 5 years without a father. He knew what men looked like, but not what fatherhood felt like. "Not yet. Papa." The word came out small, uncertain, but hopeful in a way that shattered something in both their chests. Sophia gasped. "Micah, no, sweetheart, his." Lucian sat on the edge of the hospital bed with the gentleness of a man handling something holy. "Hey, kid. How do you feel?" "My heart is strong now." Micah's small voice carried absolute certainty. "The doctor said so." "Are you my papa now?" Silence filled the room like a fourth presence. The heart monitor beeped steadily. Rain pattered against the window. Outside, Los Angeles glittered indifferently, unaware that a man with blood on his hands was learning, for the first time in his life, how to be gentle. Lucian looked at Sophia. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't move to stop them. She simply waited. "If your mama says yes," Lucian said, and he extended his hand to Sophia, not asking, but offering. Sophia took it. She squeezed his hand like it was her only anchor. "Lucian, you don't have to. You don't owe us. I want to. If you'll have me." His voice was steady as stone. "Both of you." Micah reached out and touched Lucian's face with one small hand. "You're real." "I'm real," Lucian confirmed. 1 month later, moving trucks lined the curved driveway of the Vitoli mansion. Sophia stood in the marble entryway, no longer wearing a maid's uniform. She wore a simple navy dress that Lucian had left on her bed that morning, with a note, "You are not staff anymore. You are family." Rocco and Gino hauled boxes up the grand staircase, their usual stone expression softened by something approaching warmth. They'd seen their boss change before, but never like this. Never with a boy on his shoulders, laughing as Lucian pretended to stumble under his weight. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, embraced Sophia in the kitchen. "I always knew you were more than a maid," the old woman whispered. "I saw how you looked at him. How he looked at you when you weren't watching." Micah ran through the mansion's halls like he'd been set free from a cage. No more fear. No more small, enclosed spaces. The marble floors echoed with the sound of his laughter, a sound that had not existed in this house before. Lucian taught him to tie a tie in front of the bathroom mirror, standing behind the boy, guiding his small hands. "Watch how the silk moves. It's like a dance." Sophia stood in the study at midnight, watching Lucian hold a photograph. His brother. His nephew. Both dead because of betrayal, because of two people who believed that money could buy forgiveness, that cruelty could purchase safety. "You still miss them," Sophia said softly. Lucian didn't startle. He knew she was there. Every day. She sat beside him on the leather couch. "They would be proud of you. Of this." She gestured toward the ceiling, toward where Micah slept in the bedroom across the hall from theirs. "You saved us. You saved me first." Lucian set down the photograph and turned to face her. "When you didn't run. When you cleaned my wound instead of running away." She kissed him, and outside, in the security room 2 floors below, Rocco wiped his eyes while Gino watched the monitors. "Boss finally found his family," Rocco said quietly. The newspapers ran the stories in the last week of December. Federal agents had raided Victoria Ashford's estate at dawn. They found records of wire transfers, documentation of her involvement in 3 murders, evidence of racketeering that stretched back 15 years. She was arrested in handcuffs on her front lawn, her face twisted with rage and terror as cameras captured every moment. The courts handed down a 40-year sentence with no possibility of parole. Her fortune was seized, her accounts frozen, her name dragged through every major news outlet in the country. Harold Brennan's name appeared in a different section of the papers. His landlord had sold the apartment building to a development company that immediately converted it to affordable housing with rent controlled at fair market rates. Former tenants who'd lived under his predatory leases for years now signed new agreements with reasonable rates. Harold himself was listed in the federal penitentiary database, serving time for his role in the conspiracy against Sophia, for the assault that had nearly destroyed her. 6 months later, Sophia stood at the mansion window with Micah's hand in hers, watching November rain fall again. But this time the fear was gone. This time there was an engagement ring on her finger, catching the light of the city below. The neon reflections on the wet pavement didn't look like danger anymore. They looked like possibility. Lucian came up behind them, wrapping his arms around both of them. Micah leaned back against his chest, completely at ease. "Papa, tell the story again," the boy said. "Tell how you saved Mama." Lucian looked at Sophia, and she nodded. "One day," he said, his voice low and certain, "your Mama walked into my life when she had $78 to her name and no hope left. She was breaking, but she didn't break. She was frightened, but she didn't run. And I realized that the strongest person I'd ever met was standing in front of me, and I couldn't let her face what was coming alone." Sophia turned in his arms, looking up at him. "People ask me how I survived. They ask how a widow and a maid became the fiancée of the most powerful man in Los Angeles. They ask if I'm afraid of his darkness, his past, the violence that follows his name." She held up the photograph of her first husband, pressed it against her heart. "I tell them the truth. I was drowning in darkness long before I met Lucian." Harold Brennan's predatory hands. Victoria Ashford's cruel words. The weight of poverty and fear and invisible suffering. That was darkness. Lucian didn't add to it. He pulled me out of it. Lucian kissed her forehead while Micah hugged both their legs. "My first husband taught me to love," Sophia continued. "My second husband taught me that love can deliver justice where law cannot reach. And that's the only truth that has ever mattered." The 3 of them stood silhouetted against the window, the city lights below them, rain washing the pavement clean. A family forged from broken pieces. "Darkness cannot drive out darkness," Sophia whispered. "Only love can do that." If this story moved your heart, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because tomorrow we have another story about justice, love, and the power of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Comment below, what would you do if you witnessed someone being dragged like Sophia was? We'll see you in the next one. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.